Hello, my name is Craig Little. I'm here to talk to you today about building a Kubernetes lab. We're going to take it from a little bit different point of view. And for those of you, this is session TUT 1254. Let's take a look at what the agenda is. We're going to talk a little bit about what the components are that are in play, what we need, lab goals and use cases, what the lab architecture kind of looks like, some build out steps, and then we're going to demo how to do this build. The little bit different point of view that we're going to take is we are going to do this from the point of view of a Linux expert. So I'm making some assumptions here when we talk about what the build out steps are, what the demo is that you know Linux. I don't have to explain how to get Docker built, some of these sorts of things, or Linux OS, naming standards, DNS, these sorts of things. I'm going to make that assumption. And the real goal here is to take somebody who knows Linux is going, Kubernetes looks really cool, but I'm not a dev guy. I don't necessarily write code, and I really want to learn about this technology. So that's our goal here, is to work through those pieces. So let me introduce a little bit more about myself. I'm one of the sales engineers for North America. I work predominantly with the SUSE customers, and I've been doing that for almost 6 years now. And you've got my contact info right there, as well as, I'm assuming, in the speaker notes and things of that nature. Please feel free to drop me a note. I would love some of your feedback. This is the methodology that I've used to go build my labs quick and easy. It's not necessarily, doesn't have all of the pieces in it, but it is a quick way to get a Kubernetes lab and get some management in place to go play with the technology. So let's take a look at what is Kubernetes, what is some of the key vocabulary that we want to kind of talk about, and make sure you kind of understand some of these pieces. So Kubernetes is an open source platform that automates the management of application through containers. It's just another compute platform that can run in a whole variety of places. Because containers are really just a different form of virtualization, whereas virtual machines, just like they sound, and like you probably are already aware of, it's a whole operating system and whole machine. We are virtualizing what the hardware looks like to an environment. Kubernetes is really virtualizing the application space with a shared kernel. And this is something that's overall has been around for quite some time in the form of Docker containers, today Podman, CR, Cryo, other container engines. But we've got some good capabilities in place. Kubernetes has brought about the ability to manage it. So this is similar to what happened on the straight virtualization with VMware and with KVM hypervisors. We really brought in that ability to manage those entities, because as soon as you start getting that sprawl of both virtual hosts as well as the virtual machines, containers, it's the same thing. You've got that sprawl. We need a way to manage those in a good fashion. Kubernetes is that management framework, but it's not necessarily easy to just stand up a quick Kubernetes cluster. And now what do? I'm stuck at a command prompt. So as we talk through what Kubernetes is, we've got some management pieces that are included in this lab. So we've got a container registry. This is just a place where we go get the content to be able to deploy into our Kubernetes environment. Container registries can be available out on the internet, or you can have private registries. Rancher is that management tool that I was speaking about that allows us to manage our Kubernetes environments. So that's one of those pieces that we want to make sure we've got as part of our lab. RKE is the Rancher Kubernetes engine that we are going to be using. It's a CNCF certified Cloud Native Compute Foundation. that's a certified Kubernetes distribution that runs entirely within Docker. And so that's going to be one of our easy button pieces. And so this allows us to minimize some of the common frustration of installation. So we're going to go down that road and use that piece of it. We've got some other Kubernetes options that are available to us with K3s or RKE2, but we're gonna kind of focus on the RKE distribution to begin with for the purposes of this lab. The Kubernetes components at play. So you've got a couple of pieces that make up a Kubernetes environment. The first part is a Kubernetes cluster. It's a one or more nodes that are the control plane nodes. So etcd control plane, and then you've got worker nodes. So the goal is that you would have at least one administrative node or control plane node and worker nodes. In our particular case, you can do that on a single machine, or you can do it on multiple nodes. In our particular case, we're actually going to run our Rancher cluster as a single node cluster. I know it sounds odd for those of us that kind of go back into the classic definition of a cluster, but with Kubernetes, you can have a single node cluster. For the operating system choice, we're going to run Linux. That is the predominant OS for Kubernetes. Windows is making some inroads, and there's some value to the Windows based. But today we're really going to focus on Linux. We're going to have a Rancher management cluster, and then we're going to have some downstream clusters to be able to manage. The Rancher management cluster is that web-based GUI that allows us to manage Kubernetes and manage many downstream clusters to make it easy for somebody trying to learn. But it also provides significant value for those that are already have some understanding of Kubernetes and want to be able to manage it easily. And then we're going to use some container registry for both public and we're going to use some public container registries to be able to get to some of that content. So lab goals. The goals of the lab is really to be able to build out a Kubernetes infrastructure. K8 is shorthand for Kubernetes. We want to learn to install Kubernetes. We want to practice managing Kubernetes and deploying containerized applications. So these are kind of the goals of having a lab. And the pieces that we're going to have in this lab demonstration are able to do these pieces. Can I do them at scale? Can I do thousands of applications? No. But I can do enough that I can do my learning, I can play, I can practice things, I can learn to write the YAML code necessary to deploy the applications. And some of the use cases that this lab is going to answer, one of them, which is my particular use case, really is being able to practice demonstrations like this demo that I've built for SUSECon here. But I also use it for practicing how I demo Rancher, how I demo the use of K3s, things of that nature. That's part of what I do in my role as a sales engineer. But you may have other types of roles where you might need that demo capability. I want to practice and learn how to do something so I can present it to the team that you work with. But it's also to have a place to deploy container applications, a place to go play, a development environment, operations processes. If you're really more on the ops side of things, but you're going, man, they're handing me these pieces that I need to manage. This is the kind of environment that you can run with and give you some time to go learn. And the last one, which frankly, all of those use cases up above really are all about learning. And so that's the end goal here, is to be able to learn how to do these deployments in a way that you can play, practice, and move forward with. So let's talk about our lab architecture. Simple architecture diagram here. We are going to have a single node cluster for our Rancher management cluster, and then we're going to have one or more downstream clusters on which to manage it. For the purposes of our demo today, we're really only going to use two components: the Rancher single node Rancher management cluster and a single node downstream cluster. If you want to start playing with high availability and some of those pieces, you can build it out with multiple nodes for that rancher management cluster, as well as multiple nodes in each of the downstream clusters. So you do have that option, but we're starting with just singles, just enough to get us up and running and move some things forward. So the build out steps. Overall, we are going to run through 2 virtual machines in my particular case. This way, we've got the ability to run it on my laptop. Now, you kind of have to have a little bit of a beefy laptop to do this. But the other way to go is if you have a hypervisor at work that you might be able to use, or you might have a beefy desktop with a decent amount of RAM that you've got a hypervisor running on. KVM, you could deploy OpenSUSE with KVM and have a great little hypervisor environment. But we're going to use 2 virtual machines. One of the virtual machines is going to have 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gig. The other one, for the downstream cluster, we're going to skinny up just a little bit with a single CPU and 2 gigs of RAM. Again, you can add additional VMs for additional downstream clusters, or 2 additional VMs into that rancher management cluster to get you a 3-node high availability type of cluster. So kind of keep that in mind. Additionally, you can fold in bare metal servers if that makes sense. If you were wanting to do this from a bare metal point of view, a couple of laptops with 8 gig of RAM would get you enough machines to be able to do this. Once you get things running, you also can use things like a Raspberry Pi to be able to deploy this on and to be able to build out your environment. The RKE and K3S is even better, can be deployed on ARM inside of Raspberry Pi. So you got some fun capabilities, but again, we're gonna kind of contain this onto 2 virtual machines. So that's our end goal. The quick steps to build, and we're going to install some operating system. I'm going to use OpenSUSE 15.3. We're going to get Docker installed and set up and running on all those nodes. And then we're going to install Rancher with some documentation. And we're going to step through that documentation. We're going to walk through it so you can see what it looks like. Once Rancher is up and running, we're going to use its deployment capabilities to be able to install our downstream nodes, or our downstream clusters to be able to manage. So that's our goal for the demo today, is to kind of walk through those steps to where you end up, or we end up through the end of the demo with that ability to have a Rancher server deployed and to do the deployment of a downstream cluster. So that's our goal. That's where we're headed. So let's take a look at our demo. So I'm going to grab my virtual machines over here, and we're going to bring that up to full screen. And let me get logged into it here. I got to learn how to spell correctly. And clear the screen, and let's see. There we go. We got hopefully the text is, we'll take it a little bit larger there. Hopefully that text is readable. And actually, before we get started on that one, let me step out of that. And the first thing I want to kind of show you is OpenSUSE. So opensuse.org. I am using Leap 15.3, or we have 15.4 beta out there, but I'm using 15.3. So you can go get it right from this link, and away you go. You got some downloads and some choices that way. But again, I'm assuming you know how to do these things. But I just wanted to let you know there is a community supported version of Linux that's open and available to you to go play. So that, just to kind of let you know on the OpenSUSE side of things. So let's take a look at our Rancher documentation. So this is our installation. And how I got here is I grabbed the 2.6 latest. I went to installing and upgrading Rancher. And actually, while we're here, let's take a look at the installation requirements. And we've got some choices here. And the hardware requirements is the other piece that I kind of wanted to walk through. So if we're taking a look at RKE, we've got small, medium, large, and we're going to go with on the small. So 2 virtual CPUs and 8 gig of RAM. So that's how we got to that level of implementation of the need for the virtual machines. So, and then we can take a look if we were doing other sorts of things. We've got some choices, but that was the first sort of piece. And then as we step down into the installation, other installation methods is where we are headed, and installing Rancher on a single node using Docker. So again, there's multiple ways to approach this, but we're grabbing this particular piece. So it talks about the network requirements, provision a Linux host. I'm assuming you know how to do this particular piece. Choose an SSL option and install Rancher. There's many options that are available. I'm going to go with the default with the Rancher generated self-sign cert. So that is our run command. So this is kind of the cool piece. I'm just going to go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. And let's go ahead and grab my Rancher virtual machine, my Leap 15 Rancher virtual machine. We'll get that out there. We'll clear this up again. A couple of commands that I wanted to show you, to kind of show you that things are running. Systemctl status Docker, as long as I can learn how to spell or learn how to type. So it's active and running. That is our primary piece that we need to have. Now, one of the things that I haven't done, and I probably should do, but I haven't done it yet, is to set up DNS for this machine. So in the short term, we're just going to grab the IP address. And so it is 192. Okay, so we got our IP address. So now I'm just going to go ahead and paste this, and let's go ahead and execute it. So notice that it was unable to find the image locally. So what it did is it's pulling the latest, and that was part of our command, Rancher latest. So we've got the pull, the extract, it's done all the downloads. So we are cruising right now on getting this all downloaded. Notice so far, it's a single run line. That's all we needed to do to create a Kubernetes cluster and do our download. Grab our pieces. So we've got this all up and running. And so now what we're waiting is for it on the back end. It's taking all of these downloaded pieces and creating our Kubernetes, single node Kubernetes cluster along with our Rancher instance. This does take a little while to run. And then, so we want to kind of wait and see what's going on here. Let's take a look and let's see. We'll give it just a second. Seems to be a little busy. We'll kill that guy. And so we're just running Firefox from within our box here. 68, 133.145. and unable to connect. So we're still waiting for all of these pieces to start. And it takes just a little while for all these components to kind of hook. There we go. So a potential security risk. And that is because we've got self-signed certificates here. So as most of you know, we can play with self-signed certificates. It's fine. You know the server that's running on here. And so we can do accept the risk and continue. But I'm going to let it sit for just another couple of seconds here. So hopefully that it's all built and everything's up and running. We at least have a web page. See, threw me out, so it's not quite ready to launch. And there we go. We've got our dashboard. So this is our first launch into Rancher. So from here, for a Docker run installation, to go ahead and find our initial password, because I didn't specify one in the build. So we're going to do a Docker PS over here. And that's going to get us our container ID. So there's our container ID. We're going to pop back over to here. And we are going to go look, as long as I can capture the whole thing. So it's copied. We're going to paste that right in here. We're going to scroll back over. And we are going to replace the container ID with, this is our Rancher container ID running in Docker. Yep. Because of course I copied over that. Get back through here. You know how when you're typing and the more that people are watching, the more you screw up. At least that's the way it is for me. So there is our Bootstrap password. So all we've done at this point is we've really just followed the instructions on our first login page. I'm going to go ahead and copy that guy. We're going to jump back in here to our Rancher environment. Notice we've got our password. Let's paste that big long password. And we are never going to save that for this particular site. Welcome to Rancher. So this is good. It's given me a new password. We're going to copy that out. And I'm going to go ahead and just paste that into a notepad over here. Let me go find this. There we go, because it's and we'll paste this guy. There we go. And I've got that. Or actually here, let's set a specific password. There we go. I like that one better because I can type that one and remember that one. Again, I'm kind of bypassing some best practices here because I'm just going to leave my server URL as the IP address. We're going to allow the collection of anonymous statistics, and I agree to the terms and conditions. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. It's going to go create our instance of Rancher, and it doesn't like my password. Let's see if that one, there we go. I got at least 12 characters in there. Here's our Rancher instance. So this, in a matter of just a handful of minutes here, we have got our initial Rancher instance up and running, quick and easy. And now we can use this Rancher instance to go ahead and create our next downstream cluster. So we got some choices here. And this is kind of cool that we have all of these cloud providers. I can deploy stuff into or go manage our Kubernetes services in the public cloud. I can go manage infrastructure as a service in the public cloud. We've even got our Harvester integration here. So I can go deploy a Harvester cluster or deploy clusters out of Harvester. We are going to go use the custom. Also notice that we are on 2.6.5, which is brand new as of, I believe, yesterday. So we get to see some of the new pieces. I can change my cluster type up here from RKE1 to RKE2 K3S. So I even have some additional deployment options. Again, kind of on that mode of let's just hit the easy button. We're just going to leave it as RKE1. We're going to go into custom. And one of the things to keep in mind, RKE2 is not just the next version. It kind of is, but RKE2 is our more security-focused version of Kubernetes. We're using the FIPS 140 certified crypto libraries, things of that nature in it. It deploys a little bit differently, but you have those choices inside of Rancher. So we're going to give this, we got to give it a cluster name. So let's call it all lowercase test one, because I'm going to be really original here. We can always edit as YAML. Kubernetes version, we might as well run with the latest, but we've got choices. But we're going to leave it as just the latest. We've got choices of our various network providers. Again, Canal, kind of like it. I would need to use, let's see here, I believe it's Flannel to get Windows support. In this particular case, don't really care about Windows support, so we're going to move back to our Canal option. We've got some other choices that we can do here, and we're going to do none as our cloud provider since we don't really have a cloud provider. We can open up and set some private registry pieces. We got some advanced options that we are going to, or that we could set up. We're not going to worry about that. We're just going to go ahead and install straight up defaults. And we're going to hit next. And so it saved it. Keep in mind, you need to have at least one node that has the etcd role and the control plane role. And so in that mode, since we're only going to have one node downstream cluster, we have to have all of these pieces configured. Notice what it did on our command line here. It added, as soon as we clicked on the etcd, it added etcd. As soon as we clicked on control plane, it added control plane, and we need the worker. So this gives us, and since I'm running sudo as admin, I don't need the sudo command. This gives us our Docker run command that we can now go create our downstream cluster. So again, I'm going to copy this, and we are going to go to tabs, and we're going to go to our downstream node here. And let me get logged into it. And again, let's pump this up just a little bit so everybody can see. Do it one more. There we go. I like that better. So again, I'm already in the root equivalent here. And it's not letting me. There we go. systemctl status Docker. Let's make sure Docker's up and running. Excellent. Ping 168.133.145. Oh man, I gotta learn how to type correctly here. And there we go. I'm able to ping that IP address. So we should be good to go from that point of view. And there we go. Now I can see my prompt one more time. Remember, I had copied over our Docker run command, and there it is. So Docker run, privileged mode, and we are going to go ahead and create our downstream cluster. Here is where it is laying in the Rancher agent on that new cluster, and it's pointing to our server. Keep in mind, DNS, probably should have used it here, but DNS will help you here. It'll also be the bane of your existence. But we can go ahead and run in this mode. And we're just going to go ahead and hit OK. And you'll recognize some of the same sort of pieces here where we're doing the download. And so it's doing the extract. We got everything downloaded and it is cruising. So we'll let it go ahead and finish up here. And then we'll pop back to our Rancher instance and we'll make sure that we see the Rancher cluster or this new downstream cluster sitting there. It's probably going to take just a couple of minutes like we had in waiting for the Rancher server to start. So we'll let it go ahead and finish its thing, and it is running. So we'll go ahead and do a Docker PS. So it is cruising. So we got it created 5 seconds ago. It's been up for 4 seconds. And so we'll let it sit and cruise for just a minute. While we're waiting on that, let's jump back into our Rancher server. So this is our test cluster. So if we go back to the home, we can see it's in the provisioning stage. And so it's a 123.6, Rancher 1. So it is cruising. Notice also our local cluster, which is our Rancher management cluster, is running on K3S. So we got that cruising. So it's got a single CPU and then the 8 gig of RAM. We got 10 pods out of 110 running on that. Let's go ahead and click into that cluster while we're waiting. And so we can kind of see some of the resources, what's running. And again, this is our Rancher management node or management cluster. And so notice just a single node. One of the things to keep in mind on this particular piece is that we can go look at some of the apps. We can see what's installed. And this gets us our charts right here. And one of the things to keep in mind here is all of these charts that are in blue are ones that are available for you to install. And if you have support on Rancher, you can call SUSE to get support on any of these pieces. So we got the Prometheus and Grafana pieces. We got some new vector security pieces. I like the fact that that got moved up into the blue section out of the partner section. Rancher backups, the CIS benchmark, one of my favorite little security tooling pieces. This will go out once you enable it, and enabling it is as simple as hitting the install button right here. So these are Helm charts, which is a way of deploying entire applications. So you will learn to love Helm charts. So this is one thing that you can use to go ahead and do that install, and it'll scan your clusters and look for security holes. Essentially, it's a configuration level piece. So we've got, looks like we actually have a really very updated chart here with 2.0.4. So that's under the app section. And we are going to go back to home. And we're going to see if our test cluster is up and running. And it is not yet. It's still in the provisioning state. And this may take a little while because, again, that's a little lighter weight cluster or a little lighter weight node. But we have successfully run through the steps to be able to go install Rancher cluster. So we installed the Kubernetes cluster with Rancher running on top of it. And we used Rancher then to go create our further downstream managed clusters. And away we go. So it's provisioned. It's now waiting for the API to be available. And so it's cruising. It's just walking through that process. But since we're at a point where this is like watching paint dry, I think I'm going to tell you guys thank you. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate you hanging out to this point of the presentation. Hopefully this helps you understand that it doesn't take a whole bunch of steps to go do this install as a point of getting started. And as you can see, we're starting to pick up more data in here. And like I said, this is a little bit of a lighter weight cluster, but there we go. It just went active, and now I can drop into it. And apparently we're still waiting on some things. So we are going to go ahead and let it hit home to the dashboard. And like I said, I'm going to say thank you, and I appreciate your time today. And we're probably just waiting for some things to continue to get up and running on there. Have a wonderful SUSECon. Thank you for your time. Bye now.